Paul, thanks for coming on. We've been looking forward to this one. I know you know Alex very well and worked with Alex quite closely over the years, but we only met on a pre-interview recently, and that was great fun, to say the least. And actually, glad we weren't recording for the last 10 minutes because we had a bit of a laugh setting this one up. Anyway, try and get back to the job at hand. Welcome to the show, first off.
Thank you.
The first thing we always do with guests is just trying to get to know a bit about their background and ask for a bit of a whistle-stop tour of your career, really. So tell us a bit more about you.
Sure. So I'm Paul Callaghan. I'm the Head of Client Solutions here at GEDU Apprenticeships. My background has been, for the last 10 years, within the apprenticeship space. And prior to that, I was in mainstream recruitment, so working for a lot of the high street nationals in a regional business development role. So career's been very much engaging with human resources, learning and development, and quite interesting to see how the faces of that has changed over the many, many years I've been in recruitment.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we really wanted you on. Obviously, Alex was the person that contacted you originally. You know Alex, but the fact that you kind of bridged this gap between L&D and apprenticeships and even recruitment in that kind of triangle really is interesting to us. So tell us a little bit about where you're at now, what it is you do now.
I'm, as mentioned, Head of Client Solutions for GEDU. So GEDU are a very new apprenticeship provision within the space. And my role here is to really grow and develop the Client Solutions team and take the apprenticeship proposition to market. But I think, as with anything, the apprenticeship space is changing so much. So it's really to learn a little bit more about what clients really want from apprenticeships and what they think they know about apprenticeships, what they don't know about apprenticeships. So it's really changing the face of apprenticeships is what the GEDU vision and strategy really is.
And in day-to-day role?
Day-to-day role, managing a team, is getting a strategy, looking at client needs, where we can add value, not just to the customers, but to the apprenticeships. I think, there's two people, two different types of people within the partnership or relationship that training providers have. And so for a provider, for us, it's equally as important that the apprentices get the same great service that our clients do. But really getting under the skin and being solutions orientated, I think the clue is in my title around client solutions. It is good to go out and business develop, but I think customers and apprentices want a lot more than that. Working with Alex and individuals like him to understand the changing face of the apprenticeship market. Every client's need is different.
And that's why I thought you'd be an excellent guest, really, because I think we hear so many misconceptions about apprenticeships from others in L&D. And I thought you're always very honest, so you'll give us an honest appraisal of what they are and really kind of when they're most effective as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many different categories of clients and business when it comes to apprenticeships. I've worked with some amazing L&D individuals over the years that really get it and really understand the huge part that apprenticeships and apprentices play in any business. And then you've got in some clients that think they know and don't really look at anything other than what they're used to. So it's the old adage of do what you've always done, get what you've always got, and not really wanting to explore any further around the different services that really good apprenticeship training providers can provide businesses. Others have absolutely no idea, just know that there's an apprenticeship levy. And it's only when the finance director suddenly realises it's not being used that they suddenly think they need to do something about it. And, there's businesses that are just still, not very receptive to apprentices and look at the old, the graduate schemes, traditional recruitment means. So there's a lot of camps. So there's a lot of, within the client solutions team, there's a lot of people that, we've got to convince sometimes that apprenticeships are the right thing to be doing.
Right. And just for the benefit of some listeners, you mentioned the apprenticeship levy there, in case anyone's abroad as well, what is the apprenticeship levy and how do people access it, or how do companies access it?
The apprenticeship levy was a levy that was introduced, I want to say, in 2016-17 by the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, and it's a tax that's offset against a salary bill. In short, organisations that have a £3 million salary bill or more would pay a 0.5% tax on that. And those funds are put away in a digital apprenticeship account and can be offset against apprenticeship training. Those individuals that don't, the government contribute 95% of the funding for apprenticeship. So each apprenticeship and there's several out there. I mean, I think the number one on the Institute of Apprenticeships, abattoir worker, and I think goes right through to Z. And I think I was looking the other day, and I want to say 800. Check that for me, please. But I think there's something, a ridiculous number of apprentices out there, or apprenticeships out there. So, and you can offset, and each individual apprenticeship program has a different funding band. So that's really what it is. It's a free form of money, if you like, for organisations to use to recruit young talent into their business, recruit career changers into their business, even upskill existing employees. And I don't think a lot of businesses know the benefits of the apprenticeship levy. And with a lot of things, a lot of organisations think, oh, it's funding, it's government related. They go onto the website, oh, too much red tape, and automatically want to shy away from it. It's actually really, really simple to set up a digital apprenticeship account. And your training provider should be able to help with that from the get-go, but it's very, very simple to do.
I think you've got two things here, haven't you? I mean, I should actually mention, we probably mentioned this to you before, but Alex and I actually produced, I think it was 87 pieces of content, wasn't it, Alex, on a day's filming at Dragon's Den. Mm-hmm. But we had a lot of people influencers, if you like, from the apprenticeship world. And that really was to help educate people about what the levy was and how you go about it and how best to utilise it, etc. And we, to this day, I'm still baffled as to why that hasn't kick-started apprenticeships. If anything, apprenticeships have gone down since then. What are some of the issues around apprenticeships, and maybe expand even on the levy? What you mentioned there, the or the perceived complication of getting a digital apprenticeship account. What is the reticence behind apprenticeships and using the levy, I guess?
I think it goes back to tradition. I think, a lot of businesses are immersed in tradition, and they, as I touched on earlier on, they've always recruited in a particular way. And therefore, why change? Why reinvent the wheel? And I think that it's just basically understanding. In my experience, when businesses get it, they get it. And it snowballs, and it's fantastic. And they might start off with 1 and 2s, but, with the right training provider, I can guarantee that at the end of it, they'll have, a number of apprentices in various different disciplines. And I think, again, if you've always been an individual that has potentially gone down, dare I say it, the graduate route, and, I'm not looking degrees at all. Degree apprenticeships are available, and degrees are right in certain roles, and apprenticeships aren't right for a lot of people. But I think historically, it's you go out, you do your milk rounds, you find your graduate, beg your pardon, and then they join your business. Whereas I think with the apprenticeships, they feel that there's the younger element of it, so you can hire an apprentice at 16. So they could be fearful of emotional intelligence, or work ethic. We have a number of apprentices in our business here, and I've placed a number of apprentices 16 to 18, and their passion and their desire and their attitude to work blows you away. So I think they tend to pigeonhole. And it's a bit scared of the unknown, really. And again, it's the element of wanting people to have a degree. I've been in recruitment a long time. So when I was in it in the start of my career, I'm not going to give the game away, but the start of my career, people recruited. And then it became completely en vogue to recruit graduates for absolutely everything. So you'd end up speaking to HR, and they would be looking for individuals, and they must have a degree. And it always blew me away, even then, that why somebody would go to do a degree and then work in a job where they wouldn't actually necessarily utilize that degree. And again, I think a lot of it was to do with the kind of the emotional intelligence. But I think you need to embrace young people and the passion and the enthusiasm and the great ideas that they bring. I've got my own team, my own client solutions team is various different ages, and the younger people in the team bring some great ideas, and we go away going, wow, we never actually thought of that. So I think it's just being scared of the unknown, Nathan, really, more than anything else. And just the idea of it's the support that's needed, which I always find strange, because surely anybody that starts a business needs support. Anybody that starts a business needs a really good induction and regular reviews and regular appraisals. So I don't see why that would be any different. Or why apprentices should be any different. That should be part of any reasonably decent organisation, should be looking after their people. But again, I think there's the potentially the pastoral care that could potentially put them off. But again, with the right training provider and the great skills coaches and success coaches out there, it should just be a really great partnership and a really great journey for everyone.
Do some believe it's really only those kind of trades like, I don't know, building or carpentry? Is that still a problem that perhaps people don't realise there are these 800 standards? Do people realise there's so much out there?
No. Is the simple answer to that. I think it's really interesting. I've dealt with some organisations that have a number of apprentices in what you class as the biblical trades, and or engineering or car mechanics. You can absolutely, but have no potentially idea that they can have apprentices within data or business and finance or professional services. And that's always quite interesting when they realise that they can use the levy for training those apprentices. Or indeed, if you haven't got a levy, what a great way to find talent as they grow with your business. In my experience, apprentices tend to be a lot more loyal than potentially individuals that have experience.
It came up with the chat Alex and I had with the guest last week, Rhys Davis at Tilbury Douglas, didn't it, Alex?
Yes, yeah. They've got a variety of schemes on the go, and just the passion he had around bringing young people through, really. And I think it's something you shared in the pre-interview, Paul, around the ethical use of apprenticeships, or the appropriate use of apprenticeships, should I say, being more focused on giving young people opportunities rather than being solely focused on upskilling those that already have a career.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. My team go out and speak to businesses around how to use their levy, and that is an area that you can use your levy in. But I think 47%, and again, sorry, Alex, check this for me, but I think 47% of apprentices that were actually signed up last year were existing members of staff in nicely paid jobs. And so, there's an awful lot of businesses that are using the levy to upskill existing people rather than actually looking and thinking, well, we should be doing our bit, for want of a better expression, for the young people within our communities. If you're looking at, organisations, large organisations in city centres, there's a number of, surrounding areas that really, have areas where going to university is really not an option. Again, one of the things that we talk to businesses about is social values and their social value strategy. And it's really quite interesting to find out that they have one, but they're not really sure what it is, or they don't have one and they don't know what it is. Not all companies, some are spot on with it, and they have some fantastic social value pieces. But again, I think in the climate that we find ourselves in more than ever, with cost of living crisis, etc., there's some challenges for parents who are thinking, how are we going to be able to support our children going through university over the next 3 or 4 years? So I think that, again, businesses tick a lot of boxes when it comes to apprentices, boxes that they probably don't even realise that they're actually going to be ticking.
I'll chime in with a few of the stats there, actually. So
thank you. I've got them right.
830 standards. So I think we're pretty close to that. From public qual worker through to youth worker, and almost half of employers have used levy funding for training younger people aged 16 to 25. And it's actually 47% use it to train new starters and 27% used it for upskilling. But probably the most glaring stat here on this page is that the apprenticeship levy paying employers are only using an average of 55% of the available funds, which kind of brings us on to that, next question in terms of, who you work with within organizations, whether it be the business owners, operations managers or HR generalists or L&D leaders. You mentioned in the pre-interview that sometimes working directly with L&D can be a little bit more difficult than the other areas, and understand basically the reasons behind that or where those difficulties arise, really.
If I look back over the years that I've been within the apprenticeship space, some of our biggest successes have actually been going directly to the end user, for want of a better phrase. So individuals that are going to actually benefit from the apprentice being in their team. And I always find it, L&Ds sometimes, and I found this in the recruitment space, they decide on a lot of things, but it doesn't actually directly affect them. So it doesn't affect their department's productivity or their department's retention or their department's overall demographics. And they look at it at more of a top level. So that's an interesting question, Alex. I think it's about making sure that you're getting the message right. And it's trying to understand what the pain points and the business challenges are of organisations, or not necessarily organisations, but departments. You have some departments that run smoothly, no hiccups, no issues, and it's fantastic. And then there's another part of the business on a different floor that is struggling for one reason or another. So it's trying to understand what their pain points are, what their challenges are, and then aligning the benefits of having an apprentice or using apprentices in those spaces, because they're proven to resolve a lot of the challenges that people have. Skill shortages, retention, boosting productivity. And there's a pretty endless list here.
You don't have to name the company, of course, Company X. Give us an idea of a case study, success story, where perhaps you've got into an organisation that aren't even using their levy or really don't see the value in apprenticeships, etc. How have you taken them through a journey where they've been able to sort of culturally change and take this on and perhaps even seeing the benefits already?
I think it's to involve. I think that's one of the most successful clients springs to mind. Was a very well-known organisation based in central London. And the end user was a massive advocate, and the client solutions partner hit out at the right time and got them at the right time and got that call. Again, all credit to the client solutions partner. They're engaging. They know what they're talking about. They ask the right questions. And there was some resistance. There was some resistance from the learning and development team. But this department head was absolutely hell-bent on using apprentices because he thought it was the right thing to do. He was doing it from a social values point of view. And was a real advocate. We ran assessment days. We still do assessment days. I think it's really important that everybody's involved. And the L&D team came along and were simply blown away by the talent, I think, and the attitude. And I think a lot of times, you're talking to people that potentially have this age group at home. So they kind of relate to, actually, you know what? I've got a couple of those at home. I'm not sure I necessarily want them in the business. And we all know, exactly, we all know people are very different when they get home to what they are in the workplace. But they were blown away by their passion, blown away by their enthusiasm, blown away by their knowledge. These people really want a career in this job, because that's what it's about. It's about earning and learning and building on that career. They hired one individual, and within 3 months we'd had a telephone call to say they'd like another couple in the department, and it snowballed and snowballed till in the end the department was recruiting half and half graduates, half apprentices.
Wow.
And they were really almost struggling to find a differentiator.
Really?
And it ended up that I remember being introduced to the new apprenticeship manager. who worked in the L&D team. So the L&D team were great champions of it in the end. And it wasn't a slow burn, initially from the initial conversation through to actually getting, apprentices within, double digits. Didn't take a long time, because I think everybody was on the same, hymn sheet, for want of a better phrase. But I think it is understanding. And I think if you've got somebody in your business that really champions it and is really passionate about it, I think people tend to get on board a little bit more, rather than have this training provider telling you should be doing it. It's always helpful if you've got somebody else internally that's banging the drum as well.
That was kind of my next question, really, was what do you think are the ideal conditions then for this to flourish? Where have you seen it really work? And perhaps where you see it not work, and maybe where apprenticeships aren't the answer.
Yeah, and as touched on earlier, then they're not right for everybody, and they're not right for every business. I think the most important thing is to understand the role that the employer plays in the journey. Apprentices need support, irrespective of whether you're taking on a school leaver at 16 years of age, or a career changer who, or a parent returning to work who worked in a different field and thought, what, I've always wanted to work in data. I always wanted to work in marketing. Apprentices or apprenticeships allow you to do that. But I think for us, it's, yes, the levy's there, but that is not the reason to hire apprentices, because it's an economical way to train and develop and recruit people. They're not the kind of organisations that, certainly from a GEDU point of view, we would want to engage with, because it's a journey. And as I say, anybody that starts a business, I'm sure L&D and HR are looking at them thinking there's going to be some longevity there, and not thinking that they're going to leave within 12 months. But, in most cases, minimum apprenticeship, you can argue, is 13 months, but in reality, it's 15 months. And they can go on to, 24, and in the trades, 48 months. So I think they've got to understand the commitment, and that's the most important part. They need support. It's giving them the time that they need. The 6 hour off the job training is always a challenge, but again, work with the right training provider, and they will let you know that actually it's not the fact that somebody's going to be away from the business for a day. But if it is, in some cases, it is. And if that's a challenge for businesses, and it's, they can't give the learner the time they need, then apprentices aren't right. And you really shouldn't be engaging, because that's just setting everyone up to fail. But it's giving them the time, giving them the support that they need, and understanding the role that they play. But they're young adults. They don't want to be treated like, some clients over the years have said, so what do we do with them? And at 2:00 it stops, it's story time, it's a bottle of milk. What do you do with them? You treat them like everybody else within your team. Yes, there's safeguarding elements when you're looking at your 16 to 18-year-olds, but actually you just treat them like everybody else. They're there to work, they want to build a career, and for them, they're the lucky ones. They're getting additional qualifications and additional learning along the way.
Alex, this really sort of ties in a couple of conversations we've had recently, Ian Bond and the use of funding for progressional purposes. And even when we spoke to Rhys Davis at Tilbury Douglas, the way that he looked at apprenticeships, probably worth exploring a bit of that, this kind of idea of using funding to bring people on. It's not just a one hit.
No. And there's obviously apprenticeships, but then there's, boot camp funding. There's a variation of apprenticeships coming with, they're talking about accelerated apprenticeships or shortened apprenticeships. I'll come on to my next question, actually, because I wanted to ask a question around how L&D leaders should approach the selection of providers, because from what I see, you might get an odd post on LinkedIn and they'll get absolutely swamped, with business development teams from providers. And because of the way apprenticeships were funded previously within frameworks and things, I find the approach of a lot of training providers to be quite old school. Then they'll look for staff, and they just want people that'll hit the phones and really kind of, batter L&D leaders and HR specialists with requests for whether they'll want to take up apprenticeships. How do you think companies should go about selecting providers?
I think it's about understanding the business, My team will research a specific sector, will research stats. And so when they're either emailing or they're having those conversations with individuals, there's something within that conversation that resonates with them, rather than have you heard about the apprenticeship levy? It's free money, yada, yada, yada. It's really to understand what the client would need in that apprenticeship space if they don't have it already. And we touched on this earlier, I think, around one of my teams was saying that they're speaking and they're saying, well, we're happy with the training providers we've got at the moment, or we're using at the moment. It's like, how do you know? How do you know you're happy? Have you really sat down and thought about what they're doing, what they could be doing, and what they're not doing? And that's what we want to be. We want to be that solution. We want to look at the challenges that they have now and what those challenges look like in 3 or 4 years' time. And we know that there are apprenticeships that are being delivered, that will be being delivered in probably 6, 7, 8 years' time, where the jobs don't even exist at the moment because of the changing face of the world of, certainly of the world of technology and data and that type of thing. So I think it's really understanding what they need. And it might not necessarily be going straight to L&D. It might be actually going and speaking to the head of accountancy and finance, the head of data, the head of IT, to understand what it is that they need, but looking at it a lot in a lot more detail and just going that extra step. Because I think that for us, it's not just a matter of just giving them the standard program. It's working with them to ensure that the program is fit for purpose. But equally, as I touched on earlier on, it's really important that the learner is getting the learning and the experience and the qualifications that they need to go on and build their career. Because in an ideal world, we'd love them to stay within their organisations for 10 or 15 years. In reality, we know that's not going to happen. Then they're going to want to take their qualification and their learning with them elsewhere. And in the right organisation, they will flourish. And again, I think we haven't touched on this, but you've got everything from a level 2 to a level 7 in an apprenticeship. So what a great way for a business to develop their people and retain their people, and organically grow them. You start somebody off on a level 3, and then they progress upwards and upwards and upwards and come away with a master's with absolutely no student debt, progressed and promoted throughout their journey, and are in a very, very, very good position.
And interesting what you're saying earlier about this idea that youngsters in particular, that don't go to university, there is a real viable option out there now, isn't there? I'm having these chats at the moment. I've got 2 daughters, 16 and 18. My 18-year-old's kind of had a gap year, although she hasn't done much with it, put it that way. She's going to uni, or hopefully Swansea. But with my youngest, very bright, she'll get 3 A levels and she'll get decent grades. But for the first time, I'm talking about maybe getting into somewhere that does some kind of graduate apprenticeship scheme. I saw it work really well with an old client of ours, Nissan. They were bringing people through day release for uni. And, after 4 years, these people were 22, knew the whole network, knew the company, that, versus a new starter who's a graduate coming out and doesn't even know how to really use the phone. So I'm hoping this is a more viable option. But isn't your job often a cultural change first? Rather than just saying, as you keep saying, you can't just go in and say you're going to need to do this and whatever. Is it the cultural piece that you have to go in and do first?
Yeah, right across the board, actually. With the apprentices influencers, because as you've rightly said, Nathan, you have children that are going to go to university. Alex, it won't be long before your little ones probably.
He is 6. He's 6, but you talk about those thoughts, but actually, I think by the time he's a school leaver, I just think the landscape will be completely different. I mean, even the overlap now between university training providers, employer providers, the world of work, I think it'll be completely different to what it is now. And I was one of those people that was funneled into a degree that I, don't use now.
Yeah. And so many people do. Degrees are there and they're right for a lot of roles and for a lot of people. But the cultural thing, I think, changes. It's almost like the stigma of you have to go to university. It's not up for negotiation. And again, in my own family, I've got a nephew that's doing brilliantly well in Bristol. And I've got a niece that's smashing it, doing an AAT level 4 in an accountancy. And they're going to have great careers, and will do very, very well for themselves. And the family embraced my niece doing her apprenticeship, and the same way as they've embraced my nephew doing his degree. You do build, emotionally. Emotional intelligence is very important. How you start to grow as a professional adult is really important. But in the right company with the right support and the right team environment, you can do that in the workplace, not get saddled with debt, and get the qualification that you want. So yeah, I think you're right, Nathan. There's a whole culture bit, and Alex touched on it. Hopefully in 5 years' time, it will be the norm to look at apprentices way before you look at graduates.
Mind you, this is the world of funded, right? I mean, do things actually move that quickly? 20 years is nothing. Wow. We might just be growing out of standards by then into something else.
Well, hopefully we've chipped away at the £3 billion levy pot that is unspent, which is when you think about the challenges and you watch the news, and it's, there's a skill shortage right across every single area. And again, if you look at logistics and you look at roles that you wouldn't necessarily think apprentices would fit in, or you could do an apprenticeship and get a qualification in, as a country, and obviously you can only use the levy in England, the apprenticeship levy in England, we are struggling to fill those gaps. And, I'm not saying apprenticeships are a panacea by any stretch of the imagination, but they certainly, are a solution to a lot of industry's problems at the moment.
It's interesting. I was looking at the stats on FE Week, for those that you don't know, is a news publisher in further education. And they had published the stats just this morning, actually, on how employers review apprenticeship training providers, and the majority are rated good and or excellent. So it's not necessarily the quality of the provision out there that stops companies using their levy. I think to hark back to what you said earlier, it's just maybe this kind of unknown. And certainly when I've been asked for referrals, it often comes out of the finance department. The FD doesn't know what to do with it, so they haven't touched it.
Yeah. There's got to be organisations out there that I remember speaking to an organisation once who went, oh, so what? So we don't use the levy, big deal, who cares? It was really that you go, well, I mean, how blasé can you be? And fair enough, nobody's holding your hands over the fire to use it, and it seems the right thing to do. And it's a no-brainer in so many ways.
And am I right in saying that the levy, if not used, is reabsorbed into the economy?
I don't know. I know that you have it for 2 years, and again, this changes, so I need to be. I've got my facts right, but if you haven't used it after 2 years, you just keep losing it month on month on month. So there's lots of money that goes into this pot. There's lots of, they don't even, organisations don't know about co-funding, whereas actually if you don't want to use your levy, you can help out your small businesses that are really struggling to attract people or struggling to recruit people. There's a certain area in the UK, I'll say in the southwest, and there's a particularly prominent employer based there. And smaller businesses really struggle because it's almost like a magnet towards their organisation, and they get the best talent and they don't necessarily have any issues recruiting. And smaller organisations really struggle to compete with that. And again, I think, if you're not going to use your apprenticeship levy, or you don't want to use your apprenticeship levy, do some co-investment with some organisations and, give them the money that's basically just sitting in a pot. I'm sure it's going to be put somewhere. It's not going anywhere. That's $3 billion. But, the worrying thing potentially is, how long will the apprenticeship levy go on for if people aren't, you've only got a small percentage of businesses actually using it. Levy, I think, I think you've just shared the statistics earlier on. It's quite scary, the amount of levy paying customers that aren't using it. Maybe because they don't know, maybe because, to quote that other client, I just don't care.
Yeah. Well, actually, I just checked that there's over 3.3 billion has been returned to the Treasury in the last 3 years.
I'm all right with my stats today, Alex.
I know, I feel like a producer. But I always find it funny, I guess, that the government is disincentivized in one way, to enable organizations to spend it. I know there's a whole rebrand of apprenticeships being done a couple of years ago and everything, but I guess if it's returning back to the Treasury, that's probably a good thing for the government, right?
It's a shame it doesn't go back to young people, though, or something, go back into education. If it just gets absorbed and it's paying for refits in people's flats, joke, then that's not good. But if you knew that was going back into colleges or trades or whatever, then it wouldn't matter so much, would it?
I think, it's the government do very little to promote apprenticeships. So everyone does. We all know it. I think it was the 6th of February that LinkedIn was going to be blown up by every single apprenticeship training provider going, it's National Apprenticeship Week, let's bang the apprenticeship drum. And, there's some input from the government, but they really, I was watching something late last year. They were talking about education and universities and student loans, and they hardly mentioned apprenticeships at all. And I'm like, this is your incentive. This is the government's incentive. And the present government's incentive. It was George Osborne that brought it in. And you've got these billions of pounds sitting there and you're not pushing it. You're not promoting apprentices or apprenticeships as much as you should. And again, is that, you've got to look at, the reasons why they are. Schools are another. They're getting better. But again, really and truly, it's, for years, apprenticeships haven't been on the agenda at all. And we work with a school and they've got an employee careers manager within the school, and they have apprenticeship days, and they really are really pushing apprenticeships because maybe they think that, to go back to your point, Alex, the face of education and further education is changing, and actually you'll start to see a bit of a flip where people aren't going to university because the fear of student debt is real, and the current economic climate, the way it is for a lot of households, is pretty scary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still of with my two. I'm still of the thought that, you said it earlier, Paul. Yes, you still need a degree. I know it's I don't really agree with it. I do think there's a life lesson to learn, but that kind of cultural change within organisations and society at large. You've mentioned again there that it does need a bit of work. It needs a bit of engagement from big employers with schools, and I have seen that work really well. Again, working with a big car manufacturer that would have all kinds of school days and 7-year-olds in doing certain activities, and then they pitch it for teenagers doing other more complicated stuff. And I thought it struck me as a really good way to engage the community. But is that not where the money should be spent? You're saying that apprenticeships aren't even promoted. But that levy money could be, some of that levy money that's being returned could be used for things like workshops and getting people really understand, young people and more importantly, I guess, their parents, understanding more about the world of apprenticeships, where the opportunities are, when they're a good thing. Surely that's the answer. There you go. Hope someone's written that down.
But again, there's a lot of good out there. This is, there's a lot of companies and lots of schools and lots of L&D professionals and leads that do a fantastic job. But overall, schools and business could be doing so much more. Clearly, there's £3.3 billion worth of levy just sitting there being wasted. And we work with some fantastic people that really champion the apprenticeship cause in all areas. But so much more can be done. And it starts at education. You're never too, when you think about it, nobody really knows, do they, when you're I wanted to be a pilot, then I wanted to be a vet. And you never really know what you want to do at that young age. But if you've got that idea of actually it's not just about going to university or not going to university, and there's that amazing piece in the middle which is called an apprenticeship that is a fantastic thing to do. And there's lots of amazing people out there that are brilliant in their careers that have done apprenticeships.
So if people wanted a little bit more information, would they be all right to reach out to you anytime just for a little bit of orientation and things? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's from our point of view, we'd never rush a customer. When we're speaking to our businesses, our levy paying customers, we know from initial conversation to actually getting apprentices in place, and that's a nice process. It should be a thorough process, and it's not going to happen overnight. It shouldn't happen overnight. Everybody's got to understand the importance. From a training provider, we're measured on our achievement rates and our timely achievement rates, and so it's not just a matter of getting as many apprentices on program as we possibly can. It goes further than that. So again, it goes back to why we're different with organisations, or how we approach our organisations, and that is about getting under the skin of the business and understanding what they want and what they need, when they want it, how they want it to be delivered, etc. So yeah, by all means, and it's not as murky as people think it's going to be.
You can't end it with a soundbite like that. Well, very, very good. Thank you. It really enjoyed that. And I think there's a lot of great takeouts, hopefully, for people listening. And actually, before you go then, what if I'm an employer and I've been told to use some of that levy money and explore the world of apprenticeships, how would I even go about that? What is involved? How would I come to you, and what are you going to do for me?
I think for me, it's understanding what you want out of the levy. So where are your areas that you need help in terms of whether it's recruitment, whether it's retention, whether it's boosting productivity, and then looking at what those results look like. So, if you're going to take on apprentices and you're going to go into an apprenticeship scheme internally, and you're engaging with the provider, what are the benefits? Where are you now? Where do you want to see your business or your department in a year's time, and then 3 and 5 years' time? This is not a short fix. We want businesses, this sounds cool, you to fall in love with apprentices. To go back to that client we spoke about earlier on that started off with, okay, we'll give you one, to actually, we absolutely need to make sure we've got the right amount of apprentices in our business, as well as we have with our graduates, and in some cases slightly tipping in favour of apprentices, and then just looking at what those programs look like. Again, I think it's really important that we remember the apprentice in all of this, and as a provider, but in terms of the client, what does that program look like? Because it's not a matter about one size fits all. Sometimes some organisations, actually that's the standard, that's great. But others want a little bit more, and we're able to do that. We're able to offer that to businesses, and then just looking at when and when you want it rolled out, and then recognising that it's you've got support. There's 3 people in the kind of partnership, if you like. You've got your provider, you've got your learner, and then you've got your actual employer. So it's that triangle of support for everybody that's really important. And not to rush it. There's no time. It's got to be right.
That's a better soundbite to end on, for sure. Now we can get back to our off-air gossiping about Enrique Iglesias and Pink.